Hi, welcome to the Arise Beautiful podcast. I am your host, Anjanette Kroom. I am a licensed mental health counselor and a self-worth coach. Here at Arise Beautiful, we cover 5 different topics. They are self, relationships, spirituality, service, and career in school. And so today we are going to be focused on the topic of service. And I have a special guest here, Frenchi Jones. I'm gonna allow her to introduce herself to you.
Well, first of all, Anjanette, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It has been amazing to watch you on the journey that you've been on with Arise Beautiful, with the book that you released, and now the podcast, and just your creativity in general. So I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to enter your space. Yes, my name is Frenchi Jones, and I am just like a gamut of things. I was thinking about that this morning of how much of a chameleon I actually am and can be. But I'm a mother. Now I am a grandmother. I just had my first grandbaby born on the 14th of this month. It's so exciting and surreal at the same time. I am also a mental health professional. I currently work for the Department of the Army in social services. I'm also an author, and I'm a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Happy belated Founders Day to my sorors that may be watching.
Yes.
Yes, 102 years we just celebrated.
Yes. So I like that. I like that there's no one title to define you. Like myself, we got a lot going on. So I love that. She's doing some amazing things. Her book, great book. My kids love it. It's on, what is the book called again?
Anxiety Like Me, and it's on Amazon.
We will definitely post the links to her book, but her book was so helpful for me and my kid who was struggling with some anxiety this year. So we're out here doing the work, helping the people. So today, like I said, we're talking about service, and how fitting is it that we're recording about service on MLK Day? Definitely this. Yes.
It's absolutely fitting. That's what I was going to say. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just get so excited because one of the things that I've always prided myself on is being committed to service, even before I became a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, where one of our founding principles is service. And I just get excited. I'm excited just like you. So I apologize for cutting you off, but I'm excited.
Yes, no worries. Like I said, it's MLK Day. We're sitting here in his legacy of service. And so I want to give people the opportunity to hear a little bit about some of the things that you do as far as serving your community.
So as I was saying, service has always been important to me. It has always been important for me as a mother to ensure that I instill a sense of humility in my children, a sense of service in my children. So since probably before they could even remember, we were always out in our community doing some type of service. Ironically, and I've just got to put this plug out there, I got to see today that my old stomping grounds of Hinesville, Georgia, they actually had their MLK parade today in spite of the weather. And I posted on my social media how much I really miss it, because service is so ingrained in who I am. And I think it's because of maybe how my mother was raised. My mom, I come from a background where my mother did not have a lot. Her and her sisters. My grandmother had 5 girls, and they grew up very poor. But my grandmother consistently served in the church and gave to the church. And in some ways, that is primarily probably how they survive. And so I grew up learning that life is completely circular. Like, you give, or you get, what you give, what you put out. And I truly wholeheartedly believe in that.
Yes. I too believe that what you give is, what you give is what you receive back. You like to put out good, positive energy. You want, if you want people to engage and get products and services and stuff for you, like you have to be willing to go out and support your community. It's always interesting when people are launching new things and people are like, I don't know who you are. And it's like, we are such communal people. Like, I think that's the one thing that is really important about our community is that a majority of our relationships are built through service and through doing life together, and so this principle of service for me, I think, is really important to talk about, and not just in your traditional sense of going out and feeding the homeless and doing the typical things that people think about when they think about service, but understanding that service is a function and an extension of yourself,
Right,
so
of humanity as a whole, right? Because as you
exactly.
said, like we are in this together. And I think this is such a timely conversation because I think that we are at a pivotal moment in our society where a lot of people are getting away from that communal order, if you will, right? Like a lot of people are very self-focused, self-centered, and you got to take a step back and look at it. And when you do, you realize like how far are we actually going alone? Not very far. And it's kind of a scary time and place to be in where people are so self-focused, because back in the day, and this is, this goes back to what I was sharing about my mom and her sisters. Back in the day, people took care of each other. They served each other. If one didn't have, the other had, and they came together and they made something. And so today it feels like we're getting a little bit away from that. And that's why I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because it's vital that we really talk about it. Like, how far away do we really want to move away from that? One of the things that I hate to see on social media is when people are saying, mind their business, or, they don't have time to be worried about who's doing this over here or who's doing this over here. Well, I've always come from the mindset that you really do need to concern yourself with your brother or sister's business, because that business eventually will affect you.
Mm-hmm. Because like you said, that underlying, we are all connected, right? And there's a lot of people that try to have that bootstrap mentality. That's one of those American mentalities that's kind of a falsehood, because you cannot get nowhere without the help of somebody. Somebody opened the door for you, right? Somebody provided a resource that you stretched. Like, yeah, you might have done the behind the scenes work, all of the hard work, putting everything together, but someone told you yes. Someone gave you a tidbit of information that was helpful for you. Like, you
Somebody
did
put you
not
on.
do it.
Yeah, somebody put you on, invited you to a podcast. We are not just walking individuals and doing everything and making everything by ourselves. Even if you believe in a higher power, you know that that's not true.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I like to say at Arise Beautiful is I like to keep the focus on self, right? We're talking about service and serving others, but again, it flows from self, right? It flows from a place where, like I said earlier in the interview, that service is an extension of who we are, right? And so there are so many parts of ourselves that are there for the purpose of serving others, right? We have skills, talents, and abilities to be able to go out into the world and serve. You don't have to turn every hobby into a hustle. You don't have to do that. You don't have to actually, if you're a person that's very busy, service can look very different depending on who you are. But the key is the willingness to serve others, and so for you, how have you used your gifts and your abilities to be able to serve your community?
In a multitude of ways. I think I have always tried to support where I can support, whether it is just showing up, whether it is providing some type of service, in-kind service or even a monetary donation, I've always tried to show up. And I think that's like the most important thing when you think about service, like you said, and I love you put it so beautifully, like you don't have to do it the same way that someone else does. But what's important is that you just show up in some kind of way. And it's funny because as you talk about self, that is so important for us to do for ourselves as well, right? To
Mhm.
show up for ourselves. And if we do that, then we can show up for the world.
Exactly. Yes. So when you hear the word serve, right, what comes to mind for you?
So because because I'm a Zeta, I'm just being honest and transparent. What comes to mind for me is what we love to say, which is to be a friend to man. I genuinely believe in that. It doesn't matter if I know you, I don't know you. If I see that there's a need, if I see that there is a service that I can provide, I will try. Sometimes to my own deficit, maybe. I
Mhm.
will try so hard to provide that. But like I said, this is something that has been instilled in me from a very young age, something that I've worked to instill in my family and my children. But that's what it means to me. It means to be a friend to man. If I see that somebody needs something or they're struggling, or even, and I actually do a lot of my service, I believe, through social media. So if I see that somebody has posted something that's concerning, I'm reaching out immediately. Are you okay? How are you doing? Um, and for me, I think, like I said earlier, that is my service to self because I'm staying true to who I am.
Yes, I love that. For me, service is sitting with people, hearing people's stories. People come to me all the time, wanting to talk, wanting to bounce ideas off of me, just be in my space and understanding, like for me, a lot of that is service because I can definitely charge for what I do, but I don't because for me, it's people first, right? And so if I can sit down and be an ear, and just help you to kind of point you in the right
You
direction,
you can do both though.
right? Definitely
Angela,
do
you can
both.
do both.
You
Yeah,
can
you can
definitely
do
do
both.
both. We definitely do both. But a lot of my service is pointing people into the right direction where they can get the resources that they need that I can't help them with. Like I can always do, oh, I see that you're going through something. I have time. I'm going to reach out and check on you and make sure you're okay. That's my service. Why do I know that that's my service? Because that's also my gift. That's where it flows. Right. And
Right,
so sometimes service doesn't have to be this like, oh, I'm going to go pick up trash. Right. Like do something that you love to do, that you are going to be cheerful doing. Right.
right.
Don't go
That's
pick up
true.
trash or you're going to be miserable doing it.
Now let me tell you something though. Let me tell you something about that. So when my kids were young, I used to, especially on MLK Day, we always observed the day of service, even before I became a Zeta. And I always would have my kids out doing something that would humble them or keep them grounded and keep them humble.
Mhm.
So sometimes picking up that trash is necessary, right?
Yep.
Or serving the homeless or the elderly. And the reason for that is because it's so important to remember where you came from. And it's so important to remember where you are and who is there around you where you are and where you're going. And that's why I said, serving the elderly, one day that's going to be you. And I've always told my kids that, always, humble yourself because never think that you are beyond, right?
Yep.
Because it could easily be you.
Exactly.
At any given moment or time, it could easily be you. So those things are important as well. But you're right. You can serve through your passions. And I'm so glad you touched on your gifts because I just want to tell all your viewers and listeners that I can attest to that. I can attest to the fact that Anjanette is a great listener. And it's so funny because, she says she'll sit and she'll listen and she doesn't necessarily charge, but she serves through her profession where she sits and listens and she gets paid to do that. And that is also a form of service. What I do in social services for the Army is also a form of service. And I take great pride in that service. And I know you do too.
Yes. And that's the perfect segue into my next point, and saying that sometimes service does come with a dollar tag. And for me, the definition of service is sharing yourself with the world. Like, what good is all of who you are, all of what you've been through, if you just go and hide it away in your house, right? If you're going to tuck it away and it's not going to be good for anything, right? So serving is the traditional ways, like we said, like, yes, we want to pick up trash, we want to take care of our earth, right? We want to serve the elderly because we will be there at one point. We want to do all of those things, but at the same time, like, you just escaped, an unhealthy relationship. You learned some lessons, and so now you have a gift that you can sit down and you can serve someone else going through that same situation, right? The purpose, I think, of this pillar in the Arise Beautiful lineup is because I want people to know that there's a bigger definition of service, that ultimately as humans we are put here to serve each other, right? You have gifts, you have talents, the things that you've been through, it all comes together so that you can serve someone else. There's an audience for your gifts. There's an audience for everything that you have been through. You just have to be willing to serve.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that point. And I think it goes back to the point you made earlier too about serving yourself, right? Because why would you deny yourself? Why would you deny yourself those gifts? Even if it is a gift of service, like you said, you want to share that with the world. And it's so important not to deny yourself. Now, I know different people have different reasons for why they may not share their gifts, but you raise a good point. Like, you know, God gave it to us for a reason. We have it and we should utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is service, really, when you think about it.
Yeah,
Because, again, you want to be able to connect with other people, and by doing so, you connect with yourself.
exactly. Exactly. So whether you are, on the philanthropy board, right, and you're donating money, or you're a stay-at-home mom, right? You can bake cookies for the bake sale, and do what you can to highlight your gifts. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So just always
Be
thinking,
anything big.
yes. Because that's the other thing too, with I think with service is another way to validate those skills and abilities that may be buried inside of you that you're not necessarily confident in, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you volunteer to help this struggling mom do something, or you volunteer to do take on an extra project at work, and you start doing these things, and then you realize, like, oh, you know what, I actually kind of like that.
Right.
And I want to
Yeah,
pursue
you
that
can,
more.
yeah,
um
you can stumble across your gifts while you're doing service. That is so true. That's a great point. Yeah.
and so it's one of those things to, again, help you solidify and validate some of the things that's in you, help you to serve other people and validate the things that are in them and help them. Like, service to me is just a way to, like, connect. I get so excited about service. And I want everyone to realize that, again, there's so many different ways that you can serve. There's always a need. There is
Right.
always a need.
You're right. And I think one of the things that I'm capturing from what you're sharing, and I think this ties back into how you serve as a confidence coach. Um, I think that when you serve your community, when you give to others, it can help build your self efficacy, because you need to have a sense of community, or you need to feel a sense of community to have a strong self efficacy, right? A lot of individuals who don't have that strong sense of self or self worth don't have that because maybe they did not have a strong sense of community behind them. And community can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't have to mean a huge, community as far as like in the terms of a town or a city or something like that, but even a strong family community, strong church community. So I get what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And you are absolutely right. You need to have that core principle or foundation of service and service to community to have that connection to build your confidence and self-worth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes service is healing, right? Like you're so consumed with what's going on in your life sometimes that you're bogged down with, you know, the heaviness of that, that just getting out and serving other people helps to shift your perspective and realize that it could be much worse, that you
Yes,
still in your darkness have something to offer other people,
yes,
you know. So
yes,
it's very healing too to be
yes.
able to go out and provide a service to your community, you know.
Yes,
And
I agree with you. It's very cathartic, and also it's contagious. It's contagious. I have had some haters, for lack of a better word, have things to say about my sharing. I'm a very public person. I share on social media platforms a lot of my life. And I've had some individuals question, well, why do you share this? Or why are you showing that you're doing this for this person? And I agree, not everything that you work for should be for applause, but instead for the cause. However, it is so important for that sense of community and to build a sense of community to put some of those things out there in the atmosphere because it is very contagious. When others see you serve others and they see you doing good, it fosters the desire for others to do good. So, there's purpose even in that. And so I always tell people, and this is a saying that we have as well as Zetas, but I always tell people, you let your light shine in whatever capacity that you can. Don't shun away from your light. Don't shun away from sharing because you never know who may need to see it, who may need to hear it, and who may need to look at you just to believe it, right? To believe that it can be done. And that's another reason why I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of all the platforms that you have. I'm already ready to pay my money to you to help me because it's important. If I could just share this little story. So I was on our Founders Day program last night, and one of the younger stores, one of our undergraduates, she shared how important it was for her to see women who looked like her in communities like the community that she grew up in, serving that community. And I got goosebumps, right?
mhm.
Because a lot of times our young people, they will see images of their communities many times and not in a positive light, or they will see individuals from their communities a lot of time not in a positive light. But to see, and she said it just plainly, to see the women who look like her caring enough about her community to serve her community was so important. And so for me, just to see you in your service and your passion and what you do, it inspires me. And I'm sure it inspires many, many other people.
Right. Thank you. Thank you
You're
so much
welcome.
for that. But it's so true, right? Let your light shine, right? And be you, right? Like live your life, live your life, live your life in service to others. Like you said, no, you never know who's watching and who you are going to make an impact on. And so, and the other thing that I like what you said about the haters. I think that's important to touch on. So we're going to touch on that real quick. Because there's always going to be haters. You are not for everybody, period. Right? You are not for everybody, and everyone is not going to understand what you're doing and what you're about. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have a message to share. That doesn't mean that you don't have an audience to serve.
That's right.
The people that you are called to, your message, your service will resonate with, and they will
Absolutely.
be grateful for it.
Yes. And believe it or not, your message is resonating with the haters too, right? Because they're paying attention.
Exactly.
And if it wasn't resonating with them, they would just scroll on past, right? They wouldn't have anything to say. But a lot of times there's a conviction that's there. So it's so funny. I said that service can be contagious, but it can also be convicting, right? And a lot of times people will know there's something more within them that they are not exuding or that they are not giving out or radiating. And so they will then, of course, project. And so what I like to say is that those people are just not there yet. They just don't understand it yet. They don't even see themselves in the process yet, but one day they will.
Right.
That's all we can do is have hope for them that one day they will.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
even for myself, I've had moments like that myself, right? Where maybe I felt insecure, or maybe I didn't feel like I was living up to my my own standard of service. And it got me down, and maybe I looked at what somebody else was doing, was thinking, oh, like she always doing something. It's a human reaction sometimes when you're not feeling your best. But like you said, it's so important for us to have the self-worth, to know what we are capable of doing, what we possess, and what we can give to the world.
Amen. Amen. We don't want the haters to stop the show, right?
That's right.
We don't want them to have you second guessing yourself. We don't want that insecurity to come up too when you're feeling a little insecure and you're like, am I not doing enough?
Right.
Because that's another side where some of us, we do a whole lot, on a day-to-day basis, and we don't realize that it's service, right? Because especially as Black women, we are conditioned and we are taught to serve. Right. Taught to serve the relationships around us, right. Care for our family, care for our friends, care for everyone else, to serve. We are conditioned to serve. We really are.
I think if I could put it in my own terms, I would say we are conditioned to give. Now, yeah. I think it's important to talk about that, because that does not necessarily equate to service, right? Because if you're doing a disservice to yourself, like you said earlier, if it's not your thing, right? Like if it doesn't feel like aligned with you, then that is not service per se, right? You may be giving, you may be going through the motions, you may be doing it with a heart and heart. That's probably not something you need to be doing. And you're absolutely right. As women, as Black women, we are conditioned to give and give and give of ourselves. I was talking to somebody through text today, and she was telling me that this person in her family is graduating, and this person in her family is doing this. She's talking about like her kids and whatnot. And I said, I am so glad that after this is all done, you will finally be able to take care of yourself and serve yourself, because for all these years, you have been serving others and sacrificing yourself. If it's a sacrifice, that is just giving and giving.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a service. Now, as a mother, of course, you're going to see some of that as a service to your children or whoever's in your life, right? And a sacrifice. But you're right. Sometimes you have to stop and say, what is the purpose of this giving? What is the purpose of this service? Does it serve me well? Because you are so right. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because we really do have to put ourselves first. Yes. And I think that's why I just kept saying you have to serve yourself first, right? Before you can serve others.
Absolutely. You definitely have to serve yourself first. And that, like you were saying, the difference between giving, sacrificing, and service. And that's where I was coming. Like, we're doing so much all the time, right? And so sometimes we are hard on ourselves when we are unable to serve someone, not realizing that we just spent so much time doing it already. Right. So understanding the boundaries around service and how to change it from that self-sacrifice to actual service. Right. Because like you said, that service, it comes back to you. That energy comes back to you. It's fulfilling. It is activating your purpose. It is activating a part of who you are. So it has to be somewhat fulfilling for it to be service. If not, we're going to be in that self-sacrificing space.
Yes. And you have to know when something is no longer serving you well.
Exactly.
I have a hard time with that.
Yes.
Even I have a hard time with that. I'm such a giver. I'm such a server, that sometimes I will put other people before myself. And matter of fact, I was just talking about this. I will sometimes look out for other people so much so that I deny myself, or so much so that I put myself in a compromising situation that doesn't feel good. And that's when you know it's not serving you well. And so you have to know when to stop that service.
Yes, exactly. Bringing it home to that arise beautiful principle that everything flows from, and that's self, right? You have to be aware of yourself, right? Because again, when we're in that serving space, we don't want to do it with a disgruntled attitude. We don't want to be in there, short fuse, snapping at people. Don't do it. You should have just said no. Just enforced your boundaries and said no. You don't want to be you don't want to be exhausted,
Right.
barely keep your eyes open and you trying to serve somebody. Like that's not helpful to anyone.
It's true.
So you need to so again, back to that self, knowing and understanding who you are, what you have to give, what you have to
I need to ask you that though. I need to ask you why we're having this conversation, because it's so good and this will be good for me. But because of maybe, especially for Black women, I think having an identity or feeling like your identity is always an extension of others, you can maybe not know when you are serving something that's not serving you. Does that make sense? Like, we tend to have identities that are somewhat enmeshed with others or with achievements or things like that, that we do not necessarily know when we're no longer serving ourselves, like when to cut it off, when it's become something beyond who we are. So how do you know that?
So, for me, it goes back to that self-reflection, right? I think that you should definitely return to self every day. You should have a meeting with self. Like, hey self, how you doing, girl? I'm good. How are you? Like, how was today? Today, I was a little exhausted today. I think I was stretched a little thin. Oh, yeah, girl. Why? Why were you stretched a little thin? Well, I said yes to too many things. Like, it's that sort of thing. Why did you say yes to so many things, girl? Well, I felt pressure from my mama because ain't nobody else going to do it for her. Oh, ain't nobody else going to do it for her. Well, did you ask for help? No, I didn't. So how do you know? Like, you got to talk to yourself, and I was having this conversation with someone.
That's good. That's real good.
I was having this conversation with someone else, is we don't self-neglect on purpose. It is because we are so used to doing and going, right? Yes. That we don't take the time to pause. And if you don't prioritize yourself and prioritize time to spend with self, you will never know self. To even know, because a lot of times, I went to school, I did all of this to make my mama proud, right? Now you a grown adult, you're in your career and you're like, I hate it.
Right.
Because you never took the time to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do?
Right. Is this really who I am? And that's what I was kind of saying, that, a lot of times we get into these modes where our identity becomes an extension of other people's identities, right?
But here's the thing with that. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it doesn't work because there's not an alignment.
Right.
So eventually you're going to find yourself at a place where you're unhappy, where you're unfulfilled.
Right.
And that is the place where now you're like, okay, how did I get here? Where you start to backtrack and realize that, oh, I'm living out my mama's dream. I'm living out, the random person that you created in your health of who you supposed to be, right? Like,
well, the thing is, sometimes I don't even think we create it. I think we just don't know. Like, I think it just happens a lot of times, just like, with women who are mothers, a lot of times it just happens that you lose your sense of self because now your whole identity becomes the kids.
Yes.
So I think sometimes it just happens. So I love what you said about reflecting. That's my takeaway from this podcast, because that is so important. Like you said, like, sit down with yourself, serve yourself daily, sit down with yourself daily and have a talk and self-reflect. And I love how you just did the whole like conversation, like just who cares if people think you're talking to yourself? Just have a conversation. You're right. And recap your day. That is so good. That is my takeaway. I will
Yeah.
absolutely serving myself with that. And for the service aspect of it and that service piece, taking a closer look at what you did to serve others and the feelings associated with that service, right?
Right.
Whether it was
Exactly.
good, whether it, and my theoretical orientation is CBT. And so I'm always thinking about feelings, like how did that make you feel? So I think that's real good. Sitting down and just assessing and reflecting, like, how did this make you feel? If it didn't make you feel good, do you want to do it again? You might want to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, yes, because again, using the purpose of that, right? Like understanding like service, you're out in a community, right? And you just serve this community and you know that there's poverty in this community, there's lack, you just confronted lack. Now you're gonna go home, you're gonna take that home with you. And now you need to do something with it. You need to check in with yourself, like, okay, today I served, I gave of myself, I feel drained, I'm very drained. At the same time, I'm sad because there are people that are out here in this condition. And then taking it a step further, like, what does that mean for me?
Right.
What does that mean for me? How can I serve this community if this is what's tugging on my heartstrings, right?
Right. Right. And I think also it's important to know your capacity, right? Because our capacities change,
Mm-hmm.
with different things we have going on in our lives, just different stages of our lives. What we may have had the capacity for 10 years ago, we may not. Everybody's doing that 10-year challenge. So we
Yeah.
may not have that capacity now, 10 years later, right? And so I think that's real good what you said, because you do need to constantly assess how you're serving, whether it's serving you, whether you're truly serving others for the right reason,
Mm-hmm.
and how you're feeling about that service. Is it fueling you, or is it draining you?
Right. And is your time and your service spent somewhere else? Right. Because sometimes um, that audience thing is important, right? And like you said, that key piece of the young lady that felt something when she saw other people looking like her in her community, right? As opposed to going into other people's communities as the savior, you know what I'm saying? Or serving somewhere else just for the purpose of checking that off of the box and realizing that you're not getting, like, you're going to volunteer with youth and they're looking at you like you're not connecting, when really that time could have been spent with the elderly where you could have connected a little bit better, you know? So that also comes with that self-reflection and understanding how you're built, how your heart flows and who your message is going to resonate with.
Right.
Sometimes for me, I get burnt out working with kids, but I know when I sit in front of children, they listen to me.
Mm.
So I'm going to spend my time with children. Now there's certain people that don't really care what I got to say. I'm not going to spend my time with them because it's not going to land. And I
Right.
think that's
Right.
that part that's important with reflection. What are you doing? Are you doing things that are effective? Is your service landing on the community like you intended it to? Or are you
Okay.
doing damage?
Right. And it all goes back to, and then this is everything that Arise Beautiful stands for, and what I've seen you do in your work is self, and the self reflection, self identity piece. That's what it all goes back to. And even though, even for myself, like I said, I was ingrained, the service was ingrained in me, but how I served may not look the same as how my mother served or how my grandmother served. My grandmother served in the church all her life.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my calling.
Yep.
So that's not what I do. And it's just really important to know that, to know who you are. And I'm still learning who I am. I'm still learning who I am, what I enjoy doing, what serves me well, what doesn't. I enjoy being there for people, but I'm also learning that for some people, it doesn't serve me well to constantly show up and be there for them.
Yeah.
So I'm learning to put myself first. And I think that's okay. I think that's, for me, that's my second takeaway. Like, it's okay. You have got to put yourself first, serve yourself first, so that you can serve others and so that you can be of good service. Because if you don't, you're doing a disservice.
Yes. 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 You cannot, we always say that you cannot serve from an empty cup. And I believe that when you take care of self, then you're able to serve from an overflow. You want to be serving from an overflow, never from a deficit, right? The deficit, that's where the self-sacrifice comes in. You don't want to be in that place. So you want to serve yourself. And what I usually tell people too is that word selfish, I hate it because I feel like that word is used by manipulators to get you to do what they want. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not bad to be selfish. It really isn't. Right. When you are, because most of us, when you think about when you make decisions for yourself, it encompasses your life and those connected to you. You're not just going to go and do something crazy and impulsive. You're just not. You know, and the way anxiety in us is built, again, we're not built to be impulsive like that. Now, some people do have impulse control. We know that. However, in your decision making as a mom and all these people attached to you, you're not just going to go do something crazy. So when you choose to do something for yourself, that encompasses everyone that's connected to you.
It's so funny because I was going to say to you, could you imagine if people in our communities really, really put themselves first? Can you just imagine what our communities would be like if everybody put their health first for themselves, if everybody put their finances first for themselves, if everybody just put their total wellness first for themselves? Can you imagine the serenity of our communities? Like I'm just envisioning that. Like it would be something that sadly many of us have never seen or experienced. But it would be a beautiful thing.
It would.
Really would.
It would.
And no one's ever really put it in that context, you know. Honestly, yeah. Honestly, until today, us having this conversation, I have never heard it put in that context. Right. But that is so true. It's so true.
Yeah. And the thing that kind of disrupts that is our trauma and the things that we've experienced. Because again, not everyone is safe. Not everyone has the best intentions, right? However, if we are honest with ourselves and begin to start making moves for ourselves, we are able to guard against that a little bit too, right? Because
you get a sense of security.
Yes, and you'll know like, okay, this person isn't moving correctly. I deserve better. I'm going to distance myself from them. Like you'll be so confident in your moves to do that. I always tell people when people are out to sabotage you and do you harm, they have to go above and beyond. And when they go above and beyond, they have that leaves a paper trail, right? That leaves
like they have to mind their steps like the whole way. Like whichever direction they move, they got to mind their steps.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a lot of energy. You're right. But it's the same thing when we self-sabotage ourselves, right? We have to mind our steps. I'm experiencing that. I'm really going through a growth season where I have to be really honest with myself and accountable. And even I'm like, oh, can't do this. You know, I'm minding my steps because I have set up something for myself that on some levels may not be completely realistic where I'm at right now in my life. Right. And so, yeah, that absolutely makes sense because when it's not serving you well, you got to mind your steps. It takes too much energy. It drains you of your energy. Yeah, it's too much.
Exactly.
What is it? It's too much. Too
much. So back to bringing it home now, back to self and service being an extension of yourself and who you are, and serving others by sharing yourself. Like it's really simple, you know, that you serve yourself by sharing yourself. You serve others. What'd you say?
What you have left. I think that's what I would add to that. Like after you've served yourself, what you have left to serve others.
Others, exactly. And
Yes.
sometimes it happens simultaneously.
Right.
You're
right. That's true. That's true. Yes. That has happened to me when I have been in a moment of service. It has happened that I was so fulfilled, that I was serving myself in that moment. But I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was like, in that part right there, that is the takeaway. And that is how I view self, because self in service, that's how I view service, is an extension of self. That sweet spot where it is two directional, where you are filling a need while filling yourself. Like that is the true definition of service, because you are doing nothing but being yourself and offering yourself to someone else.
Yes. Right. That's right. Mm-hmm. It's good. It's really good. This was a great conversation. Actually put a lot of things into perspective, things that, sometimes you walk through service, but you don't really think about the service, and especially that service to self. And I think that's why I wanted to add that piece about what you have left once you served yourself, right?
Yep.
Because if you're giving or putting too much out after you've served yourself, or maybe not served yourself, it can leave you feeling drained. But like you said, it's transactional.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, doing that whole thing, like, why am I out here serving? Am I serving because it looks good? Or am I serving as an extension of myself because it makes me feel good? Always questioning. For me, what's really important when we talk about self, what's really important is intentionality. Like, you want to be intentional about what you do, whether it's service, whether it's the people you have in your life, whether it's taking care of yourself, your children, whatever it is, you need to be intentional. And in order to be intentional, you have to pause and you have to sit with yourself and you have to do the work of what's serving me, what's not serving me, who can I serve? All of those questions become important, but you have to stop and write stop and identify your intentions.
Right. Yep. I agree.
Okay. Well, I think that is a great place. So with all of my guests, I asked them to create an Arise Beautiful affirmation. Okay. Because I believe that Arise Beautiful is like a command. It's like a command to self. It's like saying self and then, do this. And so I would like for you to craft an Arise Beautiful affirmation for our listeners about service.
I would say self, always serve yourself so that you can give the best service to others.
Okay. Nice.
Always serve yourself first. Yep. That's what I would say. And that's not something that I've always said to myself. So it almost makes me get a little emotional, because it really says to yourself, you are worthy of so much of what you give to others. And that's powerful. That's very powerful.
Very. Well, would you like to let our listeners know where we can find you, where we can find what you're offering, if you have any products or services?
Well, I am currently kind of revamping and rebranding, and that's why you and I need to sit down with each other and have a session. But you can always find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. My name, Frenchi Jones, and it's Frenchi with an I. So French, like the language, with an I on the end, and then Jones. You can find my book, Anxiety Like Me, on Amazon. And hopefully you'll be able to find me in some other places in the year to come.
Well, thank you so much. I will include all of her information in the bio. And I am so glad that you decided to take this time and have this conversation with me. We talked about some good things. It was a great conversation. And
It
so
was. It's always profound. Every time I sit down with you, it's profound. Whether it's at brunch, having mimosas, or doing this on a podcast. And I've appreciated you being on my podcast. Don't pardon my French, which I haven't had any new episodes, but hopefully in the future will. But it's always profound. Always, always,
yes.
always giving me something to think about. And I think we have kindred spirits, and so I always appreciate being in the same space with a spirit and a heart and a mind that's very similar to mine. And so I just appreciate you, and you keep arising, beautiful
Thank
queen.
you.
You're welcome.
Making me blush.
I always try to make you blush. Every time I see you, it's my goal. You have such a beautiful smile, don't she, y'all? She has such a beautiful smile. So it's always my goal to make you blush. But I think that that's our service to each other. I think that we should do that as sisters. I really do think that we should uplift each other to the most highest we can. So it's not flattery. It's honest to God, truly genuine service to you, my sister.
Amen. I believe in sisterhood, and I believe and just in my life that I've seen how sisterhood, the positive aspects of sisterhood, because a lot of people say, oh, I can't be friends with females. It's none of that. I love to connect with other women, to uplift and to empower them to do their thing. And so it is wonderful knowing you, wonderful working with you.
Like
I really appreciate you coming, having this conversation with me. Frenchi is someone that does service a lot. Like it seems like she's doing service like every day. Like if you follow her on social media, but she's always serving the community, whether it's through her job or through the Zetas, but she's doing amazing things in her community. And so thank you for taking your time to come and speak with me. Be sure to check out her book and look for more of her to come. And I thank you readers. Thank you listeners for tuning
you have
in.
readers too. You have readers too.
Yes.
Hopefully it's all the above.
Yes. So thank you so much for tuning in. And check us out next week for the next episode.
Can't wait. I'll be listening.